This is a rare Ethiopian Orthodox Bible. Manuscript handwritten in Ethiopia's sacred lethical language, Georgia. They told us history was a straight line. They lied. High in the jagged peaks of Tyigra Ethiopia, a book has sat in the dark for 1,600 years. It is not just a Bible. It is a weapon against the official narrative. While Rome was burning books about giants and fallen angels, these monks were preserving them. Science just carbonated this manuscript, and the results are terrifying for mainstream historians. It proves that a banned version of Christianity, one that speaks of alien-like watchers and a secret conversation with Jesus about the end of Satan's reign, is actually the original. You are about to learn why they hid it. 330 AD, the year everything changed. Have you ever wondered if the history books are lying to you? Not just about small things, but about the very foundation of reality. Deep in the highlands of northern Ethiopia, there is a place that time forgot. It is called the Abagarma Monastery. It sits on a dry, dusty plateau surrounded by cliffs that drop straight down into the abyss. The air is thin here. The silence is heavy. For more than 1,000 years, monks have lived here in silence, eating simple food, praying in ancient gaze, and guarding a treasure that they say was written by a saint in a single day. For centuries, Western scholars, men with degrees from Oxford, Harvard, and the Vatican, laughed at this story. They called it a pious legend. They looked at the bright, vivid colors of the book the monks were guarding and said it was impossible. Look at the blues, they said. Look at the birds. This style is Byzantine. It has to be from the 11th century, maybe the 10th if. We are generous. They dismissed it. They dismissed the monks. They assumed that sub-Saharan Africa could not possibly have produced a manuscript of such sophistication while Europe was stumbling through the Dark Ages. But here is the catch. They were looking at the world through a lens of arrogance. They never bothered to test it. They just assumed they knew better. They assumed that because it wasn't in Rome or Constantinople, it wasn't important. In 2010, everything changed. A French expert named Jacques Marier got rare permission to enter the sanctuary. He wasn't looking for a revolution. He was just looking to catalog the art. He was allowed to take a tiny piece of the page, just a fragment of goatskin, smaller than a fingernail, from a section that was already detaching. He sent it to a lab at Oxford University for radiocarbon dating. He probably expected the results to confirm the bias, that the book was 5, maybe 600 years old. But when the phone rang, the news didn't just surprise him. It shattered the timeline of Christian history. Carbon dating results were impossible. The numbers came back 330 to 650 A. Let that sink in for a second. 330 A. That is the time of Emperor Constantine. That is before the fall of Rome. That is before the first king of England was even born. It is before Islam existed. It is before the English language existed. This book was written when the Colosseum was still hosting gladiator games. It was written when the Library of Alexandria might have still been standing. This means the German Gospels are the oldest illustrated Christian manuscripts in the entire world, older than the famous books in the Vatican, older than the treasures of the British Library, and they have been sitting in a wooden shed at 7,000 feet, surviving Muslim invasions, Italian mustard gas attacks, communist purges, and fires for 1,600 years. This changes everything. It means that Ethiopia had a fully formed, sophisticated, independent Christian culture when Europe was barely literate. But the age of the book is just the wrapper. It is just the box that bomb came in. The real dynamite is what is written inside. This Bible is not like the one on your nightstand. It feels different. It reads different. It has more books. It has different words. And in the Gospel of Mark, it preserves a tradition and a narrative flow that the Western Church chopped up, sanitized, and removed. The crazy part is that this Bible contains the book of Enoch as canon. This is the book that talks about fallen angels, genetic manipulation, and the Watchers. In the key West, church leaders banned this book. They burned it. They said it was dangerous heresy. They said it was weird, but in Ethiopia, they kept it safe. They treated it as the word of God. And because this specific Bible is so old, written right when the Western Church was starting to censor things, it proves that these forbidden stories were part of the original package. Why is this important? Because the Germa Gospels are a time machine. They take us back to a version of faith that existed before politicians and emperors started editing the text to control the population. When you read this book, you are reading the raw, uncut version, and buried in the text of the resurrection, there is an implication, a connection to the spiritual world that we have totally lost. The monks say that Saint Germa arrived there in the year 494. Legend says he wrote the Gospels in one day because God stopped the sun from setting to give him more light. For years, that was just a miracle story. But the carbon dating proves the book was there when he was. The science and the legend have collided. But let's get a little deeper into that legend. Stop the sun. In modern terms, we might call that time dilation. If you are writing a massive, illuminated manuscript in a single day, you need more than just speed. You need time to stop. Is it possible that the monks are preserving a memory of a high, strange event? A moment where the laws of physics been around this specific location. It sounds crazy until you realize what else is in that region. The Ark of the Covenant, a device known for manipulating energy and matter. If you have a power source that can level mountains and communicate with the divine, is time manipulation really that far of a stretch? But why was it hidden? Why is this specific line about the resurrection missing from our books? Why? Did the West want us to forget about the Watchers and the Nephilim? To understand that, we have to look at what else this Bible contains that the rest of the world was too scared to keep. This discovery is about to open a door that has been locked for centuries. And behind that door is a history of the world that is stranger, darker, and more magical than anything you learned in school. The book survived the damp, the fire, and the war. Now it is speaking the forbidden scriptures of Om. Most people do not realize that the Bible is not a single book. It is a library. It is an anthology. And like any anthology, there is an editor. In the United States and Europe, the standard Protestant Bible has 66 books. If you are Catholic, you get 73. But in Ethiopia, the canon is massive. They have 81 books. This is not just a small difference. This is a massive gap in information. Imagine if you were watching a movie, but the director cut out the first 30 minutes where they explain the villain's backstory. That is what happened to the Western Bible. The Germa Gospels are the anchor of this tradition. They prove that this expanded Bible is not something they just made up recently. It is the original way the texts were collected in the ancient world before the Roman Empire standardized everything. The biggest, most controversial difference is the Book of Enoch. In the 4th century, church councils in Rome and Constantinople decided to ban Enoch. They said it was too weird. They did not like what it said about angels. They wanted a religion that focused on salvation and morality, not on cosmic wars and genetic hybrids. They wanted a faith that could be controlled by bishops, not one that looked at the sky in terror. So, here is the deal. The Book of Enoch explains things that the Standard Bible leaves blank. Have you ever read Genesis chapter 6 and seen the part where it says there were giants in the earth in those days? It is one sentence. It is vague. It is confusing. Who were they? Where did they come from? Why were they there? The Ethiopian Bible does not leave it vague. The Book of Enoch, which is preserved in these ancient texts, tells the whole story. It describes a group of 200 angels called the Watchers. They land on Mount Hermon. They disobey God. They decide they want to live like men, but they did not just come to visit. They came to breed. According to this text, these beings mated with human women. The result was a race of hybrids called the Nephilim. These were giants. They were violent. They were cannibals. They drank blood. The text implies they were genetic monstrosities, sterile, angry, and powerful. But it wasn't just about size. The text says these watchers taught humans forbidden technology. This is the part that makes you wonder if angel is just an ancient word for something else. They taught men how to make swords and armor, metallurgy, and warfare. Before this, the text implies humans were not waging organized war. They taught women how to use cosmetics and mirrors, seduction and the alteration of appearance. They taught humanity how to read the stars to predict the future, astrology and sorcery. They taught root cutting and spells, pharmacology and chemistry. Basically, they jump-started human civilization with technology we were not ready for. It was an unauthorized uplift. The text says this genetic pollution and this forbidden knowledge is the real reason for the Great Flood. God did not just send the flood because people were stealing or lying. That's the Sunday school version. The Ethiopian version is much darker. He sent the flood to wipe out a hybrid bloodline that was not supposed to exist. He sent it to hit the reset button on the human genome. The book of Enoch says that the spirits of these dead giants, the Nephilim, became the demons that roam the earth. They are disembodied spirits looking for bodies to possess. Now, think about that. If you take that story out of the Bible, the flood looks like an overreaction. It looks like God just got angry. But if you leave it in, like the Ethiopian Bible does, suddenly the whole history of humanity looks like a war between genetic purity and outside interference. The German Gospels come from a time and a place that accepted this as fact. They did not edit it out. They did not try to sanitize it. The Ethiopian Church believes that the spiritual world is populated by these entities, and that the battle described in the New Testament is a continuation of this ancient war. But it is not just Enoch. The Ethiopian Bible includes the Book of Jubilees. This book is wild. It breaks down history into 50-year cycles called Jubilees. It gives specific dates for everything. It claims that the Hebrew language is the language of heaven, the language of creation, which humans lost at the Tower of Babel. And it has the Book of Maccabees, which tells stories of resistance and war. It has the Book of Clement. It has the Tyigra theology, the idea that Christ's nature is one, not two. So why did the West remove them? It is simple. Control. The Book of Enoch suggests that evil is not just a human choice, but a result of corrupted spiritual forces, broken laws of nature, and advanced technology given too early. That is a scary idea. It is harder to control people when they think the problem is cosmic, not just personal. It removes the power from the church structure and puts it into a cosmic context. But the German Gospel survived. They sat in that dry, high-altitude air for 16 centuries. The humidity never got to them. The insects never ate them. It is almost like they were waiting for us to be ready to read them again. And now that we can read them and we know how old they are, we have to ask, what else is different? If they kept the story of the giants, did they also keep the true words of Jesus after he rose from the dead? The answer is yes, and it is hidden in the ending of the Gospel of Mark. Most modern Bibles have a footnote in Mark chapter 16. It usually says the earliest manuscripts do not include verses 9 through 20. They basically tell you that the end of the Gospel is an add-on, a fake, a later invention. They want you to doubt it. But the Ethiopian tradition tells a different story. They did not just add an ending. They preserved a context that makes sense of the fear and the mystery of that morning. The missing piece is not just a sentence. It is a revelation about the age of Satan and the limit of his power. And it explains why the world feels like it is falling apart even after the victory of the cross. It explains why the watchers might still be watching, decoding the missing message. Let's get specific. This is where the detective work begins. Open a modern Bible to Mark chapter 16. It describes the women going to the tomb. They find the stone rolled away. A young man in white tells them Jesus is gone. Verse 8 says, "And they went out quickly and fled from the sepulchre, for they trembled and were amazed. Neither said they anything to any man, for they were afraid." And in the two oldest Greek manuscripts we have, the Codex Vaticanus and the Codex Sinaiticus, that is it. The book ends. It ends in fear. It ends in silence. There is no appearance of Jesus, no commission to go into the world. Just fear. Scholars have argued about this for centuries. Did Mark intend to end it there? Did the last page fall off? Or was the original ending suppressed? But the German Gospels are part of a different family. They represent a text type that refuses to end the story with fear. They preserve what is known as the longer ending, but with a twist that connects it to a very specific, very rare tradition called the Friar Logan. The Friar Logan is a short paragraph found in the CEX Washingtonian Annus, a 5th century manuscript held in the Smithsonian. It does not appear in the King James Bible. It does not appear in the Enrafi. It is almost never preached on. But the theology of the Ethiopian Church, supported by the age of the German Gospels, points directly to this missing conversation. In this version, the disciples talk back to the risen Jesus. They do not just sit there and listen. They make an excuse for their unbelief. They are defending themselves. They say, "This age of lawlessness and unbelief is under Satan, who does not allow the truth and power of God to prevail over the unclean things of the spirits." Read that again. The unclean things of the spirits. Basically, they are telling Jesus, "We cannot do what you ask because the devil is controlling the world too tightly. The demonic forces, the spirits of those Nephilim giants, are too strong. We are blinded by them. The atmosphere is toxic." And here is the line, the post-resurrection line that is missing from your Bible. Jesus answers them. The term of those years of Satan's power has been fulfilled, but other terrible things draw near. Boom! Think about what that means. Jesus is saying, the devil's time is technically up. The countdown clock has hit 0, but it is going to get worse before it gets better. This changes the resurrection from a happily ever after ending into a strategic military victory in a war that is still ongoing. It acknowledges a transition period, a time where the enemy is defeated but still dangerous, like a snake with its head cut off that can still bite, or like a regime that has fallen but still has guerrilla fighters in the hills. Other terrible things draw near? What things is he talking about? The destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD? Or is he talking about the end of time? Or is he talking about the return of the Watchers? The Ethiopian text, with its inclusion of Enoch and the Watchers, understands this war better than anyone. They know that unclean things of the spirits refers back to those Nephilim and the demons described in Enoch. They know that these are not just metaphors for bad habits. They are entities. They are intelligent, and they are angry. The Western Church removed this dialogue. They smoothed it out. They wanted a clear, simple commission. Go and preach. They did not want the complicated discussion about Satan's timeline and the unclean spirits. It was too messy. It raised too many questions about why evil still exists if Jesus won. It made Jesus sound too much like a general and less like a philosopher. But the German Gospels, by existing and being so old, stand as a witness to a Christianity that was not afraid of the supernatural. They kept the long ending of Mark. They believe in the verses that follow where Jesus says believers will pick up serpents and drink deadly poison and not be hurt. In the West, people think those verses about snakes and poison are metaphors. Or they think they are for crazy people in the backwoods handling rattlesnakes. But in the context of the Ethiopian Bible, where the world is full of dark spirits, curses, and remnants of the Watchers, those powers are necessary weapons. It is not a metaphor. It is a survival kit for a spiritual war zone. The German Gospels bridge the gap. They connect the world of the Old Testament giants to the New Testament resurrection. They show that Jesus came to defeat a specific darkness that had been ruling the earth since the days of Enoch. When you remove the book of Enoch and you cut the conversation about Satan's power, you lose the plot. You lose the reason why the resurrection had to happen that way. You lose the context of the cosmic battle. But there is another reason Ethiopia might have kept these specific texts. It is not just about theology. It is about bloodline. The people who protected these books claim they have something else, something even more powerful than a book. They claim they have the box that the 10 Commandments were written on. And if that is true, it explains why they were chosen to keep the Bible safe. The mystery goes deeper than ink on paper. It goes into the DNA of the people themselves. It goes into the very soil of Axum. Why Ethiopia was chosen. You cannot talk about the German Gospels without talking about the Ark of the Covenant. It sounds like a movie script, but in the city of Aksum, just a few hours' drive from where the Gospels are kept, there is a small, unassuming chapel. It is the Chapel of the Tablet. It is guarded by one man. He is the guardian. He is the only person on earth allowed to see what is inside. He never leaves the chapel grounds. He stays there until he dies, and then another guardian takes his place. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church claims with absolute certainty that the Ark of the Covenant, the actual gold box built by Moses, the one that carried the presence of God, the one that leveled the walls of Jericho, is inside that chapel. For a long time, historians said this was impossible. They said the Ark was lost in Jerusalem or destroyed by the Babylonians in 587 BC. They said the Ethiopian story that the Queen of Sheba had a son with King Solomon, named Menelik I, and that Menelik brought the Ark to Ethiopia for safekeeping was a fairy tale, a myth invented to give their kings power. But here is where science comes back in to punch us in the face. Genetic studies on Ethiopian populations, specifically the Beta Israel and certain groups in the highlands, have found something strange. Many people in Ethiopia share a massive amount of DNA with populations in the Levant, modern-day Israel and Syria. This genetic mix happened around 3,000 years ago. That matches the exact time of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. The science backs up the legend. There was a massive migration of people from Israel to Ethiopia back then. This explains why their Bible is so different. Their faith is not a copy of European Christianity. It is a continuation of ancient Israelite religion that morphed into Christianity directly. They didn't wait for Rome to tell them what books were holy. They already had the books. They had Enoch. They had Jubilees. They had the Old Testament practices. They still keep the Sabbath on Saturday. They still have dietary laws. They still dance like King David. When Christianity arrived in the 4th century, right around the time the German Gospels were written, they just added the New Testament to their existing collection. They didn't feel the need to ask the Pope which books were allowed. They already had the Library of Solomon. This is why the German Gospels are so important. They are the link. They are the physical proof that this culture was isolated enough to keep the original traditions pure. When the rest of the world was fighting over power, calling councils, and editing the Bible to please emperors and silence heretics, Ethiopia was up in the mountains guarding the Ark and copying the texts exactly as they received them. The monks at the Abagarima monastery did not just protect a book, they protected a lineage. The missing lines and the forbidden books were not missing to them. They were essential. They believed they were the new Zion. If you believe you are holding the literal presence of God in a box, the Ark, you do not delete chapters from his book. You keep everything. You keep the weird stuff. You keep the scary stuff because you respect the source material. But let's get wild for a second. Let's talk about the Knights Templar. In the 12th century, the Templars went to Jerusalem to dig under the Temple Mount. They were looking for something. Many theories suggest they were looking for the Ark, but they didn't find it there. Did they find a map? Did they find a record saying it went south? There are rock-hewn churches in Libella, Ethiopia, that were built around the same time the Templars were active. Some researchers believe the Templars came here. They believe the Templars helped build these churches, and they believe the Templars found the Ark, or at least the people guarding it. Maybe that is the secret the Templars took to their graves. Maybe that is why the Vatican destroyed them. Because they found out that Rome didn't have the authority Ethiopia did. And what about the Ark itself? The guardians who watch it, they don't live long. They often develop cataracts. They have respiratory issues. It is almost as if they are being exposed to radiation. If the Ark is a piece of technology, a capacitor, a communication device, a weapon, then maybe the instruction manual for the world it belongs to is the Book of Enoch. Maybe you can't understand one without the other. Maybe the West lost the power of the Ark because they threw away the book that explained the context. The Book of Enoch talks about the stones of fire. It talks about celestial mechanics. It is a technical book as much as it is a spiritual one. If the Ark is in Axum and the oldest Bible is in Tyigra, then Ethiopia is not just a country. It is a vault. It is a backup drive for humanity. And if the text about Satan's time being fulfilled is true, where does that leave us? Are we living in the terrible things that draw near? Is the Ark waiting for something? 2,000 years of silence broken. So, here's the reality. We have a Bible in the West that is streamlined. It is easy to read. It is safe. It fits in your pocket. It focuses on personal salvation and being a good person. And that is fine. But the German Gospels show us a Bible that is wild, dangerous, and deeply connected to the cosmic battles of the past. The discovery that these books are 1,600 years old validates the Ethiopian tradition. It tells us that the long ending of Mark with its serpents and poison and spiritual warfare was not a mistake. It was the standard. It tells us that the early Christians believed they were living in a world populated by spirits, demons, and the legacy of the Nephilim. The line about Satan's power being fulfilled, but terrible things drawing near might be the most relevant verse for our modern world. It acknowledges that the battle is won, but the war is messy. It predicts a time of chaos. Think about the world today. We are talking about genetic modification again. We are talking about mixing human DNA with animals. We are talking about artificial intelligence that seems to have a mind of its own. We are seeing UFO disclosures from governments that previously denied everything. So here is the big question. Do you think the missing line from Mark and the Book of Enoch should be put back into the standard Bible, or is the world better off without them? And what do you think is really inside that chapel in Axum? Is it the Ark or something else entirely? Let me know your theories in the comments below. I read all of them. If you want to keep uncovering the secrets of the past, hit that like button and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.